Hey, James Kingsley here. Just going to take a moment and walk through how I built this star selection Captivate course. And you can see here, just going to start with how, what the end product is. I put in 2 stars and set that. And there's a nice little animation where I can say, oh, I think this is a 5-star, or maybe I don't like it, it's a 1-star. So that's the simpler kind of version that I built first, just to kind of check my code out, make sure I could access all the parts and pieces. And then if we get into this one, which is a little more complicated, you can see here that as I move my mouse back and forth over the stars, it highlights with me as I go. And then down here we can see that this is the overall cumulative average rating between everybody that has come in here and click the stars. And so then just so we can notice the difference, because we have a pretty high average right now, I'm going to bring it way down here to 4% and click that. And then we can see that the average declined a little bit there as well. So now let's jump over and take a look. You can see some of this code on the blog post, and I have a link to some of the other code, and I have a link to the actual course on course portfolios, so you can play with it there as well. So let me jump over and first just show you kind of how I have this set up in Captivate here. So I have my stars in here, and I named it stars demo. And let me just jump over, because this is an SVG file, and as I mentioned in the blog post, SVGs are really just fancy XML files. So if I come here, this is the 43 lines that create that set of 5 stars. And just real quick, I'll walk through this. I have some definitions set in here first, including a mask, which I cleverly called rating mask. And that's where I've created all these paths, and each one of these is one of those stars. So I have 5 stars inside here. And then I end the mask, and I end the definitions. And then I have just 2 boxes. I have the colored background, and that has a gold fill. And then I have a black box just sitting on top of that. Now, both of these boxes are masked by my stars. So in other words, imagine I have a gold box, a black box stacked on top of that. And then I have a sheet of paper with 5 stars punched out of it. So you're just looking through those 5 stars to the 2 black boxes. And so our goal is going to be, we're going to use some JavaScript and change the size of the black box to adjust it to make it look like we're changing the color of the stars. But really what we're doing is we're changing the size of one of those boxes that's under the mask of the stars. All right, so enough about that. So going back over to our Captivate file. So I have here where the learner's just going to put in a number and hit set. And when they hit the set button, I'm executing some JavaScript. I'm going to jump over and show you that JavaScript in VS Code. It'll be a little easier to see it there. And so this is that kind of example there. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm grabbing the object that holds the SVG file there. And it's, I've been doing this for a while with Captivate, so you kind of get to know their DOM structure there. And so if you recall, I named it stars demo. So I know that it's going to be, when Captivate publishes out, what I'm looking for is going to be in stars demo C_object. So I grab the first thing that's in there. That's what this is, because it's going to return an array of elements that's in there. I want the first one that's in there. Then I get the SVG document. That's that XML file. Then I go inside that document and I get the width of the box. Or I get the box, sorry. And then here I'm getting the rating from the text entry box. That's where the learner typed in the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then finally, I use just a little bit of jQuery here to grab the box that we got from up here and animate its width to that rating times 20, because it's I want a percentage of 100 here, and so there's 5 stars. And then I animate the width to that. So that's that first one. Now, if we jump over to the next one, and that's where things got, just a little bit more complicated, but not that much. And so here I have 2. I have this one is the user rating, and this set of stars is the average rating. And then when this slide loads, I'm running all this JavaScript. Now, there's a little bit more in here than you're going to need right away. And that's because I'm using Firebase to make the connection to, I'm using Firebase as my database as a service so that I can store the number that the learner selects here. I'm adding all those numbers together, and then I can display the average down here. So I store it and I retrieve it from the database there. So let's take a look at that code. Now, the first thing I'm doing here, and there's probably some more elegant ways to do this, but the first issue we have is that JavaScript, when we tell it to run when the slide starts, it's quite possible it's going to run before our stars are actually on the screen. So my not very elegant solution is I set a timeout and I wait a half a second, 500 milliseconds, and then I run all my code. So I'm just giving it a half a second, which is fine because the learner is going to take a second to read everything anyway. So then I do the same kind of thing here. I'm getting both the sets of stars. They're SVG documents, and I'm getting the black boxes that are inside both of them. And then, I'm using jQuery, and I'm setting a listener event on here. So I'm saying I want to listen for every time the mouse moves over the star rating div. Now, that's not the actual SVG. That's the div that's right above the SVG. So I'm going to listen for every time the mouse moves over that. And when it does, I get the offset of the event, in other words, where the mouse is, and I divide that by the width of that div, and I come up with the ratio there. And then I'm pushing that back into Captivate, and that's partly just, so that it gives the learner a little feedback. So that's going to display here just so they can see what percentage they're currently on. Let's see if I have that here. Go back and rerun it. So you can see here how that number is moving up there as I slide back and forth. So that's pushing that back in. And then, because I really only want them to do this once, and then I want everything to stop, I have a mouse down event on the same div. And the first thing I do when the mouse is down, once they've clicked, is I turn off this mouse move listener. So that way we can stop updating everything because they've clicked. And then this is my code, and there's more somewhere else. But this is the code that increments the values of the total score and the count of how many scores. And then I also turn off this mouse down listener event because we don't need to listen to that anymore either because we're not listening to the mouse over. So I just turn all that off so that they can't keep clicking. And then here I have, again, this is going back to the Firebase stuff. So depending on where you store your data, Airtable or a Google spreadsheet, your own database, depending on where you store these couple of lines would look a little different. But here I'm listening for every time there's a change to the database. And when there is a change to the database, then I'm updating the Captivate variable, the average rating, and I'm moving the average stars there. So let me just jump back through that real quick. Back over here, So this box down here is set by that listener. So it's listening to see when this is updated. And as soon as there's an update to the database, it recalculates this and resets that one. The code for moving this and setting that's the same for up here, just a different triggering event. So there you go. Like I said, come on over to the blog, check it out, and come play with the demo on courseportfolios.com.